first to the latest from Jammu and Kashmir. 1 out of every 2 local terror recruits in the valley is gunned down within 100 days of picking up arms. The increased violence has led to more hostility. Now security forces have made a new surrender offer to locals who want to return to their families. Here's a report.
They battle these terrorists in the jungles of South Kashmir. On Thursday, security forces unmasked the faces of the terror they fought. Their heads lowered with the shame of capture, Atta Muhammad Malik, Shamsul Vikar and Bilal Sheikh faced the media. Caught from Kazigand in Kulgam district, they are the latest catch in the ever-successful war against terror in Kashmir, which began with the elimination of Hizbul Mujahideen terrorist Burhan Wani last year. A record 72 terrorists have been killed in South Kashmir this year alone, including Wani's successor, Sabzar Bhat. And even as they tighten the noose, security forces on Thursday announced that they are keen to offer a new surrender policy for terrorists in Kashmir.
Army, CRPF हमने घड़ी-घड़ी अपील की और ये भी बोला कि जो हमारे लोकल मिलिटेंट बन चुके हैं, इस रास्ते पे निकल गए हैं, अगर वो दौरान एनकाउंटर भी हाथ खड़े कर देंगे, हम उनको जान से नहीं मारेंगे। उनको मौका देंगे वापस अपने घर में आने का और एक नॉर्मल जिंदगी बसर करने का।
The offer comes at a time when there is a stepped-up campaign from across the border to lure Kashmiri youth into terrorism. Khan said Pakistan has started a relentless social media campaign to woo them toward terror. The surrender offer will be extended to Kashmiri youth who have been indoctrinated recently but are willing to return to the mainstream. This will be the third such policy in the state after 2004 and 2010, when the government tried to rehabilitate local terrorists as well as those who had settled in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The government has already initiated the dialogue process. The Kashmir interlocutor will talk to all groups in the state, and now comes this offer to the youth willing to give up arms and join the peace process. Bureau Report, WION.
Ramu in 2012, Narsingh Nagar in 2016, and now Thakurpara in 2017. Be them Buddhists or Hindus, minorities have consistently come under attack in Bangladesh. Their homes have been torched, their temples vandalized, and the people terrorized. The perpetrators remain at large, and Bangladeshi authorities concluded blaming the opposition. Is it simply negligence, or are the attacks deliberate? WION's Bangladesh Bureau Chief Saad Hamadi finds out.
In 2012, mobs destroyed at least 12 Buddhist monasteries and 50 homes at Ramu in southeastern Cox's Bazar. Authorities explained that one Uttam Kumar Borua instigated the attack through a graphical Facebook post haunting religious sentiments. Journalists who investigated the incident reported that the post was in fact fabricated. In October 2016 at Nasinagar in the east-central Brahmanbaria, several Hindu houses and temples were torched. Yet again, authorities blamed one Rosharaj Das for creating outrage with a graphical Facebook post. A government minister later said that Das, a fisherman, was an illiterate and could not have uploaded the image on Facebook. This month at Thakurpara in the northern Rangpur, now there is another similar incident. 30 Hindu houses were torched and police identified one Titu Chandra Roy behind another Facebook post demeaning religion. His mother Jitan Bala told media that her son is an illiterate, has not been in the village for at least 7 years.
মনে তো হয় না তারপরেও যদি করে তাহলে আমি কেমন করে জানবো তা তো শিক্ষিত নয় বলে শিক্ষিত কি কো তা যদি করি থাকে অপরাধ করি থাকে তা তার শাস্তি পাইবে এটা কি মিথ্যে কথা তা তো শাস্তি পাবে আর যদি ওই না করি থাকে যদি আর কাই করি থাকে তাও শাস্তি পাবে আর তাই 5-7 বছর তো বাড়ি থাকে না তাই বউ নিয়ে চলে গেছে ঋণ করছে আর কি ওর কাছে টাকা পায় মানুষ
The incidents have a pattern, and so do the subsequent official narratives that political opponents are instigating communal tension within the country.
স্বাধীনতার পর থেকে এখন পর্যন্ত যতগুলো হিন্দুদের বাড়িঘর লুটপাট হামলা হয়েছে এ পর্যন্ত কোনো একজন অপরাধীকে গ্রেফতার করা যদি হয় গ্রেফতার হয়েছে কিন্তু শাস্তি বিধান হয়নি কারো কোনো শাস্তি বিধান হয়নি সবসময় সরকারি দল জড়িত আওয়ামী লীগের সময় আওয়ামী লীগ, বিএনপির সময় আমরা দেখেছি বিএনপির ভোলা টোলা ওই সমস্ত অঞ্চলগুলোতে বিএনপির কর্মীরা আক্রমণ করেছে। এখন যতগুলো ঘটনা ঘটছে সরকার করে কি অপর দলকে মানে দোষ চাপিয়ে রাখে।
Clearly, the motive for the Facebook post has been to instigate communal tension within the country. But why are the perpetrators so hard to identify and put to justice?
Facebook, they have no country office in our country. So it's a problem that to identify whether this ID is verified or this ID is operated by the right person.
Religious minorities in Bangladesh constituted 14.6% of the population in 1974 as per the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. They have now shrunk to a little more than 10%.
It is not a question of ethnic or religious identity. It is a question of vulnerability. Now, vulnerability, the Hindu population is, of course, very vulnerable. In 1971, they were the most vulnerable. Right now, they are not experiencing that kind of vulnerability anywhere near that. But in specific locations and pockets, they are very vulnerable. They become more vulnerable. Somebody powerful wants to grab something with the hand.
The minorities say that they want peace and stability for coexistence. Irrespective of the communities, the attacks are targeted at vulnerable groups with the intent to loot their properties that intertwine with religious intolerance. Civil society members say that the onus is on the government to identify the perpetrators and bring them to justice at the earliest so that incidents such as in Ramu, Nasinagar and Thakurpara do not repeat. At the Bangladesh Police Headquarters in Dhaka, Saad Hamadi, WION.
Now, Islamabad plans to build its own infrastructure in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and those plans have hit a roadblock. The project to build a dam on the Indus River is facing a funding squeeze. After being turned down by the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, all by the friend China was Pakistan's only hope. They wanted to finance the project by clubbing it with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, better known as the CPEC. But due to disagreements over the terms and conditions put forward by Beijing, Islamabad has now decided to withdraw the proposal. The Diamar Bhasha Dam project is worth $14 billion. China wanted to have complete ownership of this dam, something that Islamabad was hesitant to agree to. But China says it is not aware of Pakistan's decision to withdraw the proposal. Pakistan says it will now finance the project from the country's own resources. But can Islamabad afford the cost? Pakistan's economy, as we know, is on a downward spiral. Its current account deficit hit a record high of $2.6 billion back in September. Its foreign currency reserves are built on a foundation of foreign borrowing. The value of the Pakistani rupee dropped to a 9-year low this year. All these are signs of an unhealthy economy. But beyond these facts, there is another truth. The Diamar Bhasha Dam is being constructed in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is a violation of India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And now that project has taken a beating. Joining us this evening, Taha Siddiqui, WION's Islamabad Bureau Chief, Professor Madhav Nalapat, Director of the School of Geopolitics at Manipal University, also member of the India-China-America Institute, Ainar Tangan, political and economic commentator with us from Beijing, and Sujeev Shakya, economist and chairman of the Nepal Economic Forum with us from Kathmandu. Good evening to all of you. Taha, to you first. What are Pakistan's options? Can we say for a fact that it has rejected the idea of Chinese-sponsored dam?
Well, as far as right now, the news is that basically the Pakistani government has sort of said that because China wanted complete and full ownership, because of that, they do not want to have China's involvement in it. But this particular dam, the Diamar Bhasha Dam, which is in the northern part of the Kashmir region, this is basically has been the work on it has been stalling for many years now, and basically it was because of financing issues. Earlier on, there were other international financiers, like for example the ADB or the World Bank. They wanted to come in, but the Pakistanis were reluctant a little bit because of the fact that it is in a region which is sensitive, and they do not want direct intervention of foreign donor agencies. Then They went to China with the proposal, but then China put its own restrictions. From what we're hearing right now in Islamabad is that, I tried to talk to the Foreign Office about a reaction about this, whether they have communicated this to China or not, but they didn't respond. But from other, for example, from the planning division, which looks after such affairs, there is a possibility that it could be given, they could find some other international financiers for the project, because definitely, as you also mentioned, Pakistan itself does not have the financial sort of capacity to go ahead with this project on its own.
Sujeev, Nepal took a similar step. The hydropower project involving a Chinese firm was scrapped recently by Kathmandu. What were the concerns?
I think the project was scrapped because the way it was granted itself was very controversial. But as we speak today, I think that is something to do with China itself. But today you have the project that is signing.
I'm afraid your voice is not clear, so we'll try and reconnect with you, Sujeev. So hold that thought for us. Madhav Nalapat, is there a gradual wariness among signatories when it comes to One Belt, One Road, or BRI as it's now called?
Well, the fact is, Palki, that One Belt, One Road, or BRI, is a program that has just been launched just a few years ago. So I don't think there's time for a weariness of it. Of course, I think several people in India are expecting this whole scheme to implode. They say it's unfeasible. They say the territory that it passes through is frankly too dangerous for any kind of sensible economic activity. So at least so far the Pakistan part is concerned, there's a belief in India that will implode. But I think it's very far from that as of now.
Okay, it's not just some in India. Einar, let me bring your attention to this. Chinese banks have been raising hundreds of billions in yuan, billions of dollars. And many banks have said, some on the record, mostly off the record, that this highlights the risk that the state could amass hundreds of billions of dollars in non-performing loans if the projects fail. There are concerns in Beijing as well.
Well, of course there are concerns. I mean, this is a very large project, but remember, this is only one leg of what is a multi-pronged Belt and Road initiative. So everything does not depend on this completely. The real issue is how they're going to resolve this. It really comes down to commercial disputes between the state-owned enterprises, which are doing the work, and the Pakistani government, who is a little bit behind on a number of projects that they said would be completed. For instance, 4 coal-fired plants, which were supposed to be part of this new transmission line that China was going to create for them, because there are disputes about the funding, the kind of revolving loan to make sure that loans are paid on time to the Chinese companies, over things like maintenance, who will be purchasing and responsible for maintenance, and then finally this delay issue about when these plants will be ready. So it sounds more like a commercial issue at this point and not one where it's going to involve national interests.
Okay. Sujeev Shakya, you were talking about what Nepal's apprehensions are and why a hydro project was recently taken away from a Chinese firm.
It's to do with the decision-making process itself, and they have scrapped the project. At the day, there is another project that is signed. It's not really a group with China itself, but I think there are projects that India is going to sign in, China is going to sign in, and I don't think we need to be very wary about these issues.
Right. Taha, there are many who have questioned the viability of CPEC in Pakistan. Are those voices growing louder?
Well, Palki, definitely there are, immediate concerns when it comes to the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. If you just remember, like in the last 24 hours only, there were these laborers which were attacked in Balochistan province by the insurgents over there. and they basically were working on one of the local development projects, and there are a number of such attacks that have occurred in the last 1 year alone, and repeatedly just poor labor working on these projects is being targeted. Now, the issue is also because of the fact that this labor is coming from other provinces, and the insurgents say that local hiring is not being done. So there is a lot of tense relationship when it comes to Balochistan, and especially the part in Balochistan where most of this China-Pakistan economic corridor is supposed to end or start from Gawada city and all the way going through the Balochistan province, and that's a conflict-ridden zone. So definitely that area particularly will be problematic and is already showing those signs. Then on the northern side, also in Gilgit-Baltistan area where it crosses through into China, those areas have also had issues. There's sectarian violence in that area. There are also legality issues, political rights issues, and there have been protests in those particular areas too, but not the same nature that we see in the southern part as far as the insurgency is concerned. But definitely this China-Pakistan economic corridor sort of passes through areas which are problematic, and then also it has basically 3 routes going through Pakistan, and out of those 3 routes, one of them goes through Punjab, which is the one that a lot of politicians and a lot of critics have been saying that is the one that is being focused on, and sort of bringing in the same old argument about how Punjab benefits, the Pakistani Punjab province benefits where the military is or the political elite is from. They are benefiting from this project first, and the rest of the provinces are being neglected, and then we have the insurgencies down south and the issue of rights in the north.
Right. So, while as a concept it sounds grand and magnificent, Professor Nalapat, I've been looking at a lot of experts commenting on this, and let me quote from what one said: "These projects traverse insurgency-hit areas, dictatorships, chaotic democracies, and face resistance from both corrupt politicians and local villagers." Add to that the fact that countries are now looking at the example of Sri Lanka and do not want to turn into Chinese colonies.
Well, Palki, I think one question that comes up is the fact that the Chinese were ready to accept a dam as part of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Now, I am not entirely certain as to what a dam has got to do with transportation. Is it that they're going to transport through boats? Are they going to come through the Karakoram Pass with boats and transport it through the water of the dam? So, very frankly, this clearly indicates there's a lot more than just transport. That this China-Pakistan economic corridor is actually about a lot more than transport. And even the very name, when it is passing through Kashmir, and the Chinese themselves say Kashmir is a disputed territory, how can they call it the China-Pakistan economic corridor, that part passing through Kashmir? Then what the Chinese are saying is that we accept that part of Kashmir as part of Pakistan, and by implication the whole of Kashmir as part of Pakistan. The whole concept of neutrality falls flat. So in my view, this has been a very badly conceived plan, the CPEC. From the Chinese side, it's harming relations with India very significantly, and the economic benefit is very, very doubtful, frankly.
Einar, India has clearly boycotted the Belt and Road Initiative, but even those who attended the event in May are expressing their misgivings about the Chinese intentions behind this project. And yet Beijing continues to insist, and I'm quoting, the initiative is moving forward smoothly. Is this the truth?
Well, they're making best efforts, of course. This cannot be done alone. I would suggest that, and I agree with Dr. Nalapat, that there are issues out there, but I think it would be more constructive to think that if India could offer an alternative, I think that would be very interesting. Obviously, India is in very good control of its territories and could offer a road through to its ports and benefit from. In terms of why they're interested in a dam, it's very simple. It's because of power. The dam will generate power. There will be transmission lines. Part of the Belt and Road is not just a road through for the benefit of China. They're looking to create markets and stability throughout the region. And this is something that I think every country in Southeast Asia in the stands could benefit from, including India.
Professor Nalapat, before I wrap this conversation, I want to ask you, did countries like Nepal, maybe not Pakistan, but other smaller countries, really have a choice when it came to standing up to a neighbor like China and resisting the temptation of Beijing-sponsored infrastructure projects?
Well, Palki, I'd like to say that President Xi Jinping is completely committed to the Belt and Road Initiative, and when the Chinese are committed, they work very hard to ensure that it's a success. Secondly, the Chinese economy is huge. The Chinese foreign exchange reserves are huge. The Chinese investment capacity is huge. And taking off from where Einar was mentioning, the Chinese are frankly looking at India as a very large potential market. They're talking in terms of $300 billion as what would be a feasible volume of trade between India and China. They're looking at $200 billion as a feasible volume of investment in China. That's $500 billion. And I think the Chinese will be extremely happy if you have a China-India economic corridor, for example, rather than a CPEC. So yes, the Chinese are frankly very determined on the BRI, but as so far as India is concerned, I think they're still expecting that they can bring India around. And I think the fact that they settled the situation in Doklam peacefully is an indication that they haven't shut the door on that.
Well, they can start by showing their respect for Indian territorial sovereignty and not funding projects in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, but we'll leave it for another day. Thanks very much, Professor Nalapat, Einar Thangan, Sujeev Shakya, who we couldn't hear very clearly from Nepal, and Taha Siddiqui for joining us. And a day after the military took control, uncertainty remained in Zimbabwe over the fate of the next government. The world and ordinary Zimbabweans waited for news on the next move by the military and long-serving leader Robert Mugabe, who's still under house arrest. Here's the latest.
Military vehicles took position outside the parliament and soldiers were patrolling the streets of the Zimbabwean capital. The morning newspapers confirmed the news for ordinary citizens. The world's longest-serving leader, Robert Mugabe, had been deposed. There was an air of expectancy in Harare, yet people were returning to work.
Everything is normal, everywhere is normal, all the shops are open, people are back to work, they're at work, even yesterday. The situation is just normal.
The situation is quite okay. People, they are now returning to their jobs in a quiet way, in a good way.
The intervention by the Zimbabwe army is very good because we are looking forward for a new Zimbabwe, a better Zimbabwe.
Even as 93-year-old Mugabe remained under house arrest, there was no clarity on the fate of his wife, Grace. Hectic political meetings were underway, but it was not known what steps the military would take next. The United Nations, the European Union and the African Union Commission called for calm.
The Secretary-General has been monitoring the evolving situation in Zimbabwe. He appeals for calm, non-violence and restraint. Preservation of fundamental rights, including freedom of speech and assembly, is of vital importance. The Secretary-General stresses the importance of resolving political differences through peaceful means and dialogue and in line with the country's constitution.
Effectivement, cette question s'est développée alors que j'étais en voyage pour Washington. Nous avons suivi de très près l'évolution. Les militaires ont affirmé qu'il ne s'agit pas d'un coup d'État. Et vous savez, au niveau de l'Union africaine, nous sommes contre tout changement anticonstitutionnel.
African Union leaders held emergency talks in Botswana as they worked out the framework of transitional government. The big question remained, who will succeed Robert Mugabe? The toss-up as of now is between Mrs. Mugabe and her rival, former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa. The next step could well be President Mugabe's formal resignation. Bureau Report, WION.
To the public, she was Gucci Grace, or the first shopper, a snide reference to her legendary shopping trips abroad, her love for designer Ferragamo heels, and spending £75,000 on a shopping spree in Paris in 2002. It was also derived from her status as First Lady and wife of Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe. Of course, Grace Mugabe's fall from grace has been as swift as it has been sudden. But as late as last week, there was nothing to suggest her days were numbered. In fact, 21 years after her marriage to the Zimbabwean president, Grace Mugabe was looking forward to a crowning political moment, being anointed vice president, which would have been the stepping stone to the presidency when her husband hung up his boots. That was the reason, the then Vice President Emerson Mnangagwa had to go, although Gucci Grace had a different take on it.
In 1980, Mnangagwa tried to topple the president through a coup. He actually tried to wrestle power from the president.
She did not hide her ambition to be president at political rallies, she's reported to have said rhetorically, and I'm quoting, "They say I want to be president, why not? I'm a Zimbabwean." Her ambition to be president may have even driven her to poison the vice president. He fell ill during a rally last month, giving rise to rumours and speculation. She was forced to come out in public to deny them. There were other unsavoury sides to her personality. She's been implicated in violent incidents in Singapore, South Africa and Malaysia. She ran several failed mining businesses. She built a dairy empire on 5 previously white-owned farms. Grace Mugabe's days are all but over, whether outside Zimbabwe or under house arrest in the country. As some reports say, she can only contemplate what could have been. In fact, when Grace Mugabe took on the country's powerful vice president, she clearly underestimated the strength of the all-powerful vice president. Here's a report on the man who may well replace Robert Mugabe. From a leader on the run to one who may well now run Zimbabwe, 75-year-old Emerson Mnangagwa struck back within days of being sacked as the country's vice president. The ruthless regime of Robert Mugabe could well be replaced by an equally ruthless rule of Mnangagwa. Like President Mugabe, Mnangagwa is also a veteran of the country's independence struggle. Nicknamed the Crocodile after his clan's totem, Mnangagwa is considered close to Army Commander Constantino Chiwenga, who engineered the swift military takeover. A bitter rival of First Lady Grace Mugabe, he took his sacking as vice president as a personal affront. Mnangagwa had vowed to return from exile and take charge of the country soon after his sacking early this month. Long rumoured as heir apparent to Mugabe, he became his rival when the 93-year-old leader's wife, Grace, began taking an active interest in the affairs of the government. Mnangagwa is known as a ruthless administrator. He was the country's spy master at the civil conflict of 1980s when thousands of people were killed. He was also blamed when opposition supporters were attacked after the 2008 polls. Mnangagwa is also credited for the commercial activities undertaken by the Zimbabwe African People's Union Party. Unlike Mr. Mugabe, who belongs to the Zezuru group, Mnangagwa is from the Karanga community, a subgroup of Zimbabwe's majority Shona community. He grew up in Zambia and was trained as a lawyer. He had also received military training in China and Egypt. After independence, he was appointed the country's first justice minister. But it was the independence struggle that shaped his politics and his persona. Mnangagwa was tortured by former Rhodesian government forces during this period. Clearly, the scars and his never-say-die spirit survive. Bureau Report, WION.